Hi everyone, and welcome to Film here at XpoNorth. We're just going to give everyone a little bit of time to log on, so we'll just give that a few seconds. Okay. So yes, welcome everybody. I'm Brodie Pringle. I'm head of the Screen Commission at Screen Scotland, and I promote Scotland as a filming destination. My team and I proactively pursue valuable international production that brings benefit to the screen industry and more broadly the Scottish economy as a whole. We also offer support to all productions that choose Scotland as their production base. And production support issues can be complex and varied because they're very script-led, so set in the world of the creative. The Commission in Scotland works closely with a wide network of partners across the country that come together when Bond or Batman or Fast and Furious have a stunt sequence they need to find a street for, a mountain to jump off of, or one of my personal favourites, to blow something up. Here in Scotland, we have an established industry that is heading into its 6th decade. So we have a lot of highly skilled crew and talented creatives working both here and across the world, producing great films and shows. Shows like Outlander and Shetland, the feature film Tetris, starring Taron Egerton with their Scott John S. Baird directing and Gillian Berry producing. And there's something of a film boom going on right now. Governments have recognised the economic benefits of filming in their countries and have introduced tax incentives and or incentives to lure production into their territories to shoot. It's been noted that this is an industry that will, as a creative industry, always require a human workforce and a highly skilled and well-paid workforce at that, which in itself is of value. Joining me here today are 3 colleagues, all with very different territories, and I'm sure as a result, different experiences of managing shoots in their territories, promoting the area they live and work in, and the economic benefits that brings to their areas. We've got Julie Bordelon, Executive Director of Screen, also Create Louisiana and freelance producer and consultant. We have Laura Mackenzie, Executive Director of Screen Nova Scotia, and Einar Hansen Tómasson, Film Commissioner for Iceland. So welcome everybody.
Thank you.
So I thought we'd just kick off very quickly, get crack on with some questions. So what would be great is if you could all give us an introduction to the territory you cover and what you might consider as its unique selling point. Einar, would you like to kick off on that question?
Yeah, I can start. I'm your closest neighbor, so why not start?
Indeed, indeed.
And sometimes we actually have had projects I've been shooting both in Scotland and Iceland.
Yes, we do.
Well, Iceland is kind of nicely located between the 2 continents of Europe and America, and easy to get to. And we've been servicing the international industry since in the 80s. I think the first big project was A View to Kill. I've been now film commissioner for about 17, 18 years. So, and we have seen things developed quite a lot, especially since we started with the incentive in 2001. What is unique about Iceland is the diversity of our locations. And I sometimes say you can probably get them all in North America, but you would have to go all over Canada, Hawaii, Alaska, down to Minnesota and New Mexico. But you can get in a very condensed area here in Iceland. And you can basically get very extreme locations within just a couple of miles, and even just by turning the camera. So, and I would say the diversity is our biggest asset, you know. It's strange to be, substituting for a tropical island in the Pacific, like we did for Iwo Jima in the Flags for Fathers. But then, of course, we do a lot for substituting for, especially, I would say, Eastern Europe and Russia, Siberia, and then Alaska and Greenland, Northern Territories. And I will say the best example of showing of Iceland is the film The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. You know, we're supposed to be in Iceland and Greenland, the Himalayas, in Afghanistan, but all shot in Iceland. So, you know, Himalayas, like in Batman Begins, like the producer said on that film, you know, instead of go to the Himalaya, we went to Iceland, drove road 1, turned left, and there it was. So quite simple, quite easy. And what we also have in Iceland, you know, it's a fairly big island, but few inhabitants. So you get a lot of open spaces, a lot of privacy when you're filming. We don't have a film union, so crew members, I would say, they work hard. It's a 12-hour day rate, 6 days a week. So they use the long hours, and that's usually basically in the genes of the Icelanders, because in our genes we're just fishermen. And so when you have a fish to catch, you go out and you work hard, and then you relax. So yeah, this is, and we also the Icelandic production service companies. They are also servicing a lot of, I would say, our neighbors. So like with Greenland, the Faroe Islands, the biggest service company in Norway, for example, is Icelandic, and we used to work in, you know, these conditions. And
yeah,
the service companies and the Iceland crew are absolutely outstanding, and all the producers have been filming here just praise the work ethic and quality.
And Einar is right in saying we're very competitive, because I'm consistently trying to convince producers that Scotland can be Iceland. I've not succeeded yet, but I'm going to continue to give it a go.
Well, then you're lying.
And Laura, of course, Laura, you're executive director of Screen Nova Scotia. Would you like to give us a kind of a brief on your area? Obviously, it's conjuring, the name Nova Scotia conjures up some images in our heads, and what you consider your unique selling point to be.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, I think, you know, anybody who hasn't been to Nova Scotia can just picture Scotland, because we are New Scotland. That is what our Gaelic name. So, you know, we're a little province. We're on the east coast of Canada. We're a little peninsula. So we're entirely surrounded by sort of unspoiled coastline. Our population is quite small. There's only 1 million people in Nova Scotia. So our rural communities are less densely populated as well, but also really easy to get to. I think one of the most unique things about Nova Scotia is that we've always sort of traditionally been, you know, sort of a fishing province. And so we have a lot of, you know, really, really unique and beautiful and interesting little fishing villages around the coast of Nova Scotia. And we have a lot of, I would say most of the production that comes to Nova Scotia at this point is coming because we look exactly like the northeastern seaboard of the USA. And so we play a lot of Maine. So all of Stephen King's series are filmed here. And yeah, so we have a lot of production that's coming that's looking for that sort of New Jersey Hampton style look. We do a lot of that, but I mean, obviously, you know, we have pretty diverse landscape as well. So, you know, some of our beaches can also play tropical style beaches. You know, we have very clear blue waters. It'd be a little challenging with the palm trees, I would say, but we could certainly. So that's probably, you know, sort of the, what attracts the most amount of production here right now. On our, you know, very busy South Shore, we have 3 major productions that are filming there right now. And that's pretty typical. I mean, I would say, you know, and we'll get into this, we're having a busier year this year. We would always have a minimum of, you know, at least a couple of sort of major service productions that would be using our South Shore of Nova Scotia for that particular location. But, you know, we're a really old town. I mean, not anywhere near as old as of Europe, of course, but here in Canada, one of the oldest towns. And so, you know, we can play old villages, for instance, like the Book of Negroes that filmed here a couple of years ago. So we can recreate these historic stories. We have forts that are used for this in similar capacity. We can play Ivy schools. We have a lot of old, you know, sort of grand universities that you know, that obviously are required quite often. We have beautiful golf courses, some of the most beautiful golf courses in the world. beautiful vineyards and rolling hills and densely forested population. We do a lot of horror movies because we have really dark, forested woods. So those are some of the reasons why, I'm seeing productions come here, of course. But, like Einar said, we too have, an incredible depth of talent in our producers and our crew and talent here. And so we've really been sort of developing that, probably around, a similar time frame. I'd say our incentives started to come in and build in the 80s as well. And so it's a long history. It's a long time to be developing this really deep pool of incredible talent, and people that live in Nova Scotia like to stay in Nova Scotia. So it's great. So I'd say first and foremost, being able to deliver on the standards that major production service companies are expecting is the most important thing. You've got your locations, of course, and that's one of the number one reasons why they're coming. But we can also deliver on the product, and that's pretty key.
It's definitely a package, isn't it? And Julie, obviously you're our southern heat in this particular panel here. So could you give us a little idea of your particular territory and what your selling point is?
Sure. So I'm in Louisiana, and I think that a draw here a lot of the time is the weather, even though it is pretty hot during the summer. But otherwise the weather is just kind of, it's an easy place to shoot. It doesn't get super cold, doesn't really snow. We have like a month or two in the summer that it's pretty hot, but used to it. I mean, I notice all of you have on like long sleeves and sweaters, and I'm here in my but yeah, I mean, Louisiana definitely has its specific things where it's like swamps and bayous and lots and lots of water. There's a diversity of South Louisiana and North Louisiana, because in the South it's pretty flat and is where you'll see most of like your green like trees and swamps and things like that. And then in North Louisiana you have more hills, and so it gives you that kind of diversity throughout the state. People come here for our tax incentives, so you can really kind of change it up as much as you need to. I mean, we obviously don't have the extreme locations like Iceland, but people aren't coming here to shoot that. So yeah, it's
well, you mentioned tax incentives there. What are in play? What taxes are in play in Louisiana at the moment? Because it's something that obviously is very much part of the global growth of the sector, is the introductions of incentives to lure people into their areas. So what are your incentives, and have you seen them make a difference to the demand in your territory?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We've had the incentives for several years now. They've kind of changed here and there depending on what the legislation is like, but right now it's you can get up to 40%, and that's if you're hiring local, or there's different little incentives that you can get. If you shoot outside of New Orleans, you can get an additional 5%. But it kind of like goes across. I think 25% is the base, and then from there you can add on. So like if you hire a local Louisiana crew, you get an extra 10%. If you use a Louisiana screenplay, you get another 10%. So or if you use Louisiana musicians to do your scoring, you can get another 10%. So it just kind of can add on to that.
Yeah. And Laura, we were chatting a little bit earlier about your tax incentive. How have you've kind of reintroduced one, is that right? And so you're kind of rebuilding from there.
Yes, yeah. Pre-2015, we had one of the most competitive tax credits across Canada. I think we offered, it was 55% or something, with your bonuses included, which is pretty significant. And sort of across Canada, there's been this kind of race to the bottom conversation. And we had a Liberal government come in 2015, and they decided they didn't want to be part of that, and they dismantled our tax credit. And Obviously the industry revolted, and in a very big way. Nobody can come together like a film industry to revolt. So it was pretty wonderful to watch. So pretty quickly we had it turned around, but what was put in place was an incentive fund. And so that is obviously not a tax credit. It is assistance. It's like a rebate. And it's a base rate of 26%, and it goes up to 32, which is pretty easy to access. Like Julie was saying, it's just sort of small bonus points for, using Nova Scotia content and rural locations, etc. So, I would say it took a couple of years to sort of spread the message that we were in fact open for business and that we did have a lucrative incentive fund in place. But now that we've got the word out, we're seeing productions come back in full force. So that's good. But I guess that's just indicative of how important it is. We saw a massive drop in production. Just because everybody understood that we had lost our tax credit, and it took a long time. So I think one of the most important things in a community is getting the government behind, understanding that we need to spread the message that we have a reliable and consistent industry, right? There's too many production companies out there that have business affairs teams that need to keep their, sort of their books up to date on what the incentive offerings are in jurisdictions around the world. And so I think for us, this has been a real learning curve for our government to understand and get involved with us to learn, what, really are the nuances of any jurisdiction that can help attract production, because they do understand the economic benefit and the impact to the province. Now they do. Yeah. And so now they're getting much more involved in conversations with us to try to understand the nuances, which I think sometimes can be, is not as important, more important than what the actual number is, right? You need to be consistent, reliable, and to have assistance program that is, let's say, the orphan program in Canada when everybody else is running a tax credit is a severe competitive disadvantage. So, we're lucky that we. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, yeah, I mean, political will is incredibly, I think, it's such a signal to the industry, isn't it? And our tax incentive sits at 25% here in the UK. And Einar, where are you guys with your tax incentive, and how have you seen your territory develop with that?
We started our incentive in 2001. At that time, it was 12%. And with the 14, then 20, now it's 25 today. And I think it's dangerous also to start to race for the bottom. Reason because if the numbers are not blue in the actual sheet that they put in front of the parliament members and the public, they turn against it. So as long as the numbers are positive and the system is sustainable, you can have it, in my mind. At least I say it as a taxpayer. I think that's very important to have in mind. The system in Iceland is very simple. It's kind of no hoops to jump. It's just flat 25 on what is spent in Iceland for production. And like I said, we have the system in place for a long time. And it's one of the simplest one. They tell me in the studios. And so we call it the KISS approach. Keep it simple, stupid. It fits us very well here in Iceland. So,
I love that. I'm so stealing that.
So project like Star Wars, Nova, Thor, Midnight Sky, Northman. They all been going through the system and without any problems. And we're very quick rebating, and usually not more than like 3 months to pay you back when you file back all the documents. And that all, of course, is very important because otherwise it just just cost of capital waiting for the money to be refunded. So you have to have that in mind also when you say incentive system. When do they pay you back the money? Is it in 3 months or is it in 2 years?
Yeah, very important. Yeah. And of course, we've been through a pandemic, and we're all talking here about incentives to lure people back into production, that kind of stuff. In the UK, you know, we kind of re-regulated the industry and got it back up and running pretty quickly. Here in Scotland, we started shooting again in July, and we haven't stopped since. We've probably had one of the busiest years historically ever for production here in Scotland. What's your experience been, Einar?
Well, we hardly stopped. I think it was maybe less than a month that we stopped, maybe about a month. We were able, quite quick on the feet, to develop a system. So I simply called the board of the Icelandic Producers Association. They thought they were coming in for a 1-hour meeting, but we spent the whole day kind of creating like this modified regulation for filming. And we then asked the Directorate of Health to improve it and approve it. And that's a system we've been working on with since. And actually others have kind of used that system here in Iceland. Mm-hmm. Like we had a big gaming festival going on about a month ago. It was 6 months, and they used the same system. And it's kind of like we created like this, we call it the modified quarantine. It was basically you work in a bubble, and we were able to do it the whole last year, and we got about a little more than 30 international projects into Iceland last year. The biggest one was a reality show from the US called The Challenge. And of course it was a challenge because it was a big crew, you know. It was almost 200 people coming from abroad, and you had the Icelanders, and you had to mix them together. A lot of testing, of course. You had to have them 2 different bubbles, but not one incident last year. So no COVID happened on a set last year. So we were very fortunate with that. And like I said earlier, you know, one of the big reasons is this is a big country with few inhabitants. So you can get a lot of space. And what we did with the hotels, they basically occupied the hotel, and it became like a quarantine hotel for that production. And we did that for the first 5 days. You do test when you arrive, then you do test in 5 days, and if you clean, then things get more relaxed. But you know, having said that, things have developed quite dramatically for us since then, and very few incidents in Iceland. A lot of people have, you know, already been vaccinated here in Iceland. I think more than 70% have already got the first shot. Close to 50 already fully vaccinated. So we're lowering everything down now, and you know, you can easily have 300 people on a set working today, and yeah, I would say overall last year, I mean, it was a record year for domestic production, just a feature and TV. Probably close to 20 feature and TV projects shot in Iceland last year, the domestic. So overall, Iceland, yeah, I would say we were quite lucky in during COVID, and it was a record year for us. Strange to say.
And of course, it's and we're all in a different position, isn't it? Because we've all been hit by the virus at different stages. And Julie, how did Louisiana fare? How did you fare down south?
Well, I would say that production pretty much came to a halt. There wasn't a whole lot happening down here. I mean, I think we all know that the United States as a whole wasn't super ahead of things whenever it came to COVID. So I mean, I know one of my jobs, we give grants to filmmakers in Louisiana, and we had a production that was in the middle of shooting that, you know, they had this time period that they were supposed to finish their production as far as like grant requirements. So, you know, obviously we allowed them to put it on hold as long as they needed. They were able to kind of keep going as far as like, it was a very small crew. They were just very cautious. But as far as like bigger productions, I feel like things just kind of weren't really happening. It's definitely picking back up now. I see a lot of things that are starting in New Orleans. I'm working on a production here in Lafayette, and 3 more happening before the end of the year in Lafayette. So it's picking back up.
Great. Yeah, good. Nova Scotia. How's I think I was a little bit jealous when I heard how Iceland and Nova Scotia were actually coming out of the pandemic and cinemas being open and so forth. But how are things in Nova Scotia?
Well, right now we're coming out of our sort of, we call it a third wave, but our second wave wasn't really a wave. It was just, I think we had 30 cases. You know, so right now we're coming out of our, you know, our third wave, which was, you know, I think it was much worse than the initial wave, much like, you know, most other jurisdictions. But I think at our sort of highest count, we had about 1,000 cases, which, you know, per capita is, you know, we're a small place, 1 million people. So, you know, I think it's pretty good. We did okay. But so basically when COVID hit, you know, much like Julie said, like, you know, we obviously had to come to the halt. Everybody needed to find a way forward. And so what I did is immediately started a back to work committee. We are also a member driven organization. And so we're, you know, tight knit community. We started a back to work committee, which also had a health and safety committee, which was responsible for, you know, basically reviewing and you know, gathering information from all of the other sort of health and safety guidelines that were happening and putting that together. And we've come up with a really comprehensive document that we've been using ever since. So it's guidelines and then also department specific guidelines. And so we had those, you know, approved by our chief medical officer, and they've been working really well. And we also had, you know, other committees that were working on some of the other challenges that I think most jurisdictions also were concerned about. So insurance, of course, right? Insurance went away for production. And so unless the production was backed by a major studio, which was fine, domestic production was really scared to go back into production because, of course, if it goes away, then, you know, it goes away. Nobody can afford to shut down for 2 weeks and pay their actors in quarantine. And, you know, it's just, it would have been too much.
Yeah.
So it was pretty scary for domestic production. And now we do have a short-term compensation fund. So basically the insurance company is being backed by the Canadian government in the event that a production does go down. But really, really, really lucky and grateful to say that we too didn't have a COVID case on set. So we did really, really well. But I think that, you know, to the basically medical grade health and safety guidelines that the industry across the board really does adhere to. I think, you know, people are really, really cautious and careful, and that's why we can continue to work, which I think, you know, we've been, you know, the envy of every other business in Nova Scotia because we've been able to operate. It's caused some clashes, of course. Businesses don't understand why we can operate, and we've got 250 people on set, you know, on location. But it's because, you know, these productions are spending $1 million in testing, and they you know, they've got, you know, the kinds of protocols that are just, you know, so militant. You know, they're working in cohorts and they're wearing location, you know, bracelets that track their, you know, every move and who they're keeping in contact with, and they've got, you know, masks that indicate which cohort they're allowed to work beside. So it's just been, you know, incredibly safe, and our government recognized that. Let us go back to work and put, you know, systems in place for that to happen, which was great. So basically by June 1st, we had our guidelines, production was back up and running, and we had a really, really, really successful 2020. And by that, what I mean is we were able to, all the productions that had planned to produce in Nova Scotia in 2020 did so. They managed to complete all of their productions. But what happened is, you know, as soon as June 1st hit, all of the other jurisdictions, or many of them across Canada, you know, they were inconsistent in their opening plans. They would reopen and then they would close, and, you know, it was a little bit back and forth. And so many more productions started to look our way. So, you know, if somebody wants to come to Canada, they're coming to Canada because of the dollar exchange. And then they're looking out, you know, where's the value in their production budget, and, you know, across Canada. And just because of, you know, we were reliable and consistent and could keep production moving without closing down, 2021 has turned into the biggest year that we have ever had. Now that comes with its challenges as well. You know, I don't think, you know, I certainly haven't been in a position before where, I had to be concerned about not being able to crew up, an entire production, right? So we had a production come here, set up shop, and then, they just simply, we could not find the crew across Canada to come and service the production. So we were over capacity this year, which is great. It's great. One of the things that has come of that, and stop me if you want to get to the economic impact conversation later, but we really emerged, our industry has emerged in this province as one that can be relied upon to inject, production budgets dollars, like real dollars, into payroll and small businesses that are suffering.
No, it's a really valid point. And, accommodation alone, for example, takes up a huge chunk of any production budget, and we're over capacity as well. So, the expectation is you're going to have to bring crew in, you're going to have to accommodate them, you're going to have to accommodate them safely. How has that experience been over the pandemic? And obviously the world is opening back up to tourism again now. Have you found the hospitality sector been willing and open to work with you all over the last few months whilst we've continued to work and everyone else has been in shutdown? Einar, what's your experience been?
Absolutely. I would say the hotel sector, car rentals, everybody have been very eager to work with the film industry. And like I said, opening hotels, making them like a quarantine bubble for production, that says it all, I would say. And we've always had a good relationship with the tourism sector. Of course, tourism is one of the fundamental industries in Iceland. And I would say it probably, if you look at, it's kind of simplify it, you would look at the fisheries, tourism, and aluminum, kind of like our big sectors. And then you have the creative industries and high-tech industries. So the tourism sector, of course, is dependent, I would say, a little bit on the film industry, because we see a lot of what we call a film tourism in Iceland. And to support that statement, I mean, we have the tourism board kind of having every year they are studying the behavior of the tourists coming into Iceland and asking them with questionnaires, of the feeling of Iceland. And one of the key questions there is, where did you get the idea of coming to Iceland? And one of the questions there is, because I saw Iceland in a foreign film or TV shot in Iceland. And that, in 2016, you could only pick one choice. And that was, then the film tourism was about 16%, just the foreign part. And if you added the Icelandic films that people got the idea from, it was about 4%, it got 20. And if you take just the average spend of a tourist, and you take the portion of the film, of kind of the film tourists, it was more than 70 billion Icelandic kronas, which is a lot, of course, for our economy. And in the new kind of model that they have at the tourism board, then those who are coming into Iceland and ask the same question, where did the idea of coming to Iceland come from? You can pick 5 different options, and the film tourism is about 33-4%. So you can see it has a huge impact. And I can, for example, I've been focusing a little bit on India, and when we got a big project with Shah Rukh Khan, who's kind of the biggest actor in India, the embassy just saw a huge spike when it was premiered in India. And so it supports the film industry, and of course the film industry supports what we are doing. So that's very important to have a good relationship between those. Sectors.
I mean, people make a lot of money making commercials. So if you can get a nice shot of Glen Etive in a James Bond film, I think it's worth about 4 million. So absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, for example, we had Apple shooting here, in our terminal not so long time ago. It of course was a huge value for our, international airport. Apple using that in a big commercials going all over the world. So it's not just like you mentioned, not just James Bond or Star Wars.
Yeah.
Of course, the big brands like Samsung or Apple or Volvo or whatever, these things matter as well.
And Julie, have you got an example of a production that's perhaps made a significant impact of tourism in your particular area? The area where, I could probably think of a couple.
Yeah,
what is it? Yeah, no, I don't know. I mean, I feel like a lot of people come based on like just like more documentary style stuff, like all those Les Blanc old documentaries about like Cajun music and food and Zydeco dancing. And as far as like big productions, there hasn't been that many in like in my area so much, but more in New Orleans and around there. But yeah, I mean, it's just I guess people see those films, but they can kind of be anywhere, so they're not really based on Louisiana unless they're like shot in New Orleans, where it's like that's a specific kind of style that you're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. So Laura, how about you? Have you got any major productions that are perhaps returning series or something that's driving tourism to your particular neck of the woods? Again, I would love to come to all of these places, I would like to say at this point.
Yeah, me too. One that really stands out for me, we work with tourism here, but we also work with, there's a specialized organization that's called Develop Nova Scotia, and they work, hand in glove with the Tourism Association here. And Develop Nova Scotia is responsible for what we call placemaking, and that's so basically going into rural communities and figuring out like what is their unique angle that they want to sell to attract tourism and public. And so we have one particular production called The Curse of Oak Island. And The Curse of Oak Island is a story, a myth, call it what you will, that has been part of our, sort of Nova Scotia legacy, our history, our culture since, the book has been around for 100 years. And it was part of the curriculum. I read it when I was in grade 6. And it's a story that is just coveted by Nova Scotians. And so it's in its 9th season now. It was turned into a series, serviced by an LA-based company, but also working with a company here in Nova Scotia. And this show is, basically tells the story of trying to dig up the treasure that was buried in Oak Island. And so, it's a treasure hunt story. People love treasure hunt stories.
Yeah.
I don't know if any of you have heard of it, but it's done really well. I'd say it's probably the #1 show that has attracted the most amount of visitors to Nova Scotia. People just come here in hordes to go down the island to see it, to check out all the locations and the work that's being done as they dig and drill and find sort of small pieces of what one might consider treasure. Another one might consider it a button off a pair of pants from Walmart. I don't know. But it's a good show, and so we really do sort of do whatever we can to showcase that, and here in Nova Scotia. So I would say, we really focus on telling the Nova Scotia story and finding a way to connect the film or the film that's being filmed in the domestic story that's being filmed in Nova Scotia and connect it to that place so that we can attract people to that particular area.
Yeah, and we're in a bit of growth here at the moment. And you were mentioning earlier, you used the word capacity earlier, and we face the same thing here in Scotland, where we're looking everywhere for skilled crew, because local crew is what is being sought out at the moment. If you don't have to travel a piece of talent or crew in somewhere, then that's great. That's one less box to tick as such. So we've kind of looked at, say, other areas that have got some transferable skills, events being one of those, theatre being another. We've been doing quite a lot of successful outreach there. How have you been kind of trying to resolve some of these shortfalls and skills that you might be finding whilst you're at capacity? Oh, sorry, Laura.
Oh, that's for me? Oh,
Yeah, sorry, apologies.
no problem. Well, I mean, so what has happened here is we're having the first year, and it's hopefully not going to continue down this road of a lot of the service productions coming, which has really kind of dismantled the opportunity for domestic production to happen. So aside from, you know, some of the ongoing series that film here, we're not seeing a lot of domestic. I mean, there's two domestic TV series and probably a couple of films that'll be filmed here, but our crew is really being, you know, taken up by the big production, the big service productions that have come in here this year. So that's a challenge, but I guess, you know, it's sort of this push and pull, because the service productions, they have the budget. If they don't find a crew here, they're just going to bring them in.
Yeah.
People need a place to film right now, and so, you know, even if it's going to cost them a little bit of extra money to bring in the keys that they need, then they're just going to do it. We haven't really had any pushback on that, but it's also led to, you know, our local crew wanting to work on these major productions, because, you know, they're really well paid. It's a really good training opportunity, right? You know, when our crew that's emerging and up and coming gets the opportunity to sort of work under some much more experienced crew and keys, then this is, I think it's a really good opportunity. But I really believe that domestic production is incredibly important. And so
yeah,
I think, you know, going forward, we'll really do whatever we can to find a way to mitigate sort of the contraction in domestic content having been produced here, because that's our culture, that's who we are. If we don't have the ability to grow our own talent base, then we'll never have a sustainable film industry. So
yeah,
we're, you know, it's an interesting year, but we're aware of it, and we're gonna, you know, try to do some work around it.
yeah, and completely agree. And I think sometimes, you know, people don't realize the variety of people that are required to shoot in a film set, and of course that can expand and shrink depending on the script. So you know, it's carpenters, it's riggers, it's electricians, it's real physical work. And how's that experience been for you, Julie? Are you seeing growth in your crew base in your area at the moment?
Yeah, we have a pretty amazing crew base throughout Louisiana, and definitely some crossover people who might just do electrical work or whatever, but then whenever a production starts, they jump over. As well as like a lot of oil field, you know, we have a lot of oil field here, and there's been a big push to have more educational programs to kind of move people out of certain industries and into like film production. Whenever we're seeing like a decline of, you know, the oil field industry has kind of declined some, so there's been a push to re-educate people to move into production work. Which has been really successful, and lots of people are jumping on board for that. So I feel like there's never really a lack of crew when it comes to, you know, whenever I'm working on an actual production, we don't really have an issue of finding people. So that's really, yeah, it's great.
Yeah, great. And Einar, obviously you're way up there up north. How have you seen your crew base and the skills develop over the last few years with this new influx of production coming your way?
Well, in my mind, I would say the domestic and international production support each other in terms of crew members, meaning that when you have big directors like, you know, Ridley Scott or Chris Nolan coming to shoot in Iceland, and they have kind of the key people, but then they hire the locals to work with them. The locals, of course, observe the knowledge, which then they can transfer when they're working on a domestic film, which increases the quality of a domestic production. And that means we're making more domestic productions, building up a bigger crew base, of course. So I would say that's very important to have in mind, that this supports each other. Then, of course, we have a quite strong film school in Iceland, the Icelandic Film School. And then the University of Arts is working on setting up a new kind of section of filmmaking in their school. So it supports each other. And then we have being part of the European Economic Area, there's a free flow of goods, capital, and labor. So meaning if we need labor coming in, that's easy for us to get them from Europe, talented people, who then come work here, either for long haul or just for a project. So getting a crew, that's not a problem in Europe when you have this, this flexibility. And another thing, like I said earlier, that we don't have a union. So you actually can have a smaller crew than you used to, maybe, especially in the US. And you have actually the same guy, both taking out the light bulb and putting a new one in. You don't need the new guy for that. So they can work in different departments. People that are working on the project here in Iceland.
Yeah.
So yeah, it doesn't matter if you're working on a Black Sand Beach or all the way up to the glaciers. They know what to do in every situation.
Yeah. And of course, we've all got territories where they're relatively remote, and we're very, in Scotland, we're very aware that everyone in Scotland should have the opportunity to enter the industry. And some of our greatest talent has come from really quite far up north in some of our remoter locations. Is there any kind of outreach that you're doing in order to ensure that? Or are you saying that local filmmaking is really essential and important? Is that a challenge for you, or have you got any strategies in play?
If you're referring to Iceland, well, of course, the strategy is to get more young people to understand what is the life of working in the film industry. And there's a lot of interest. Like I said, having all those international projects coming in every year, and the domestic production is doing well in markets and festivals, means the increase, I would say it increases or makes the young people more attractive to that industry. And so there has been no shortage of getting people to go into the film school or to work on sets, not at all. And you talk about up in the north. I mean, up in the north is a town called Akureyri, which is a town of between 20 and 30,000 people. They actually have a very strong symphony there. Mm-hmm. And we have a special incentive for recording in Iceland. Doesn't matter if it's for an album or for a music score. And for example, the whole last year, Netflix had them occupied, just doing music scores. And so the Symphony of North have been very busy, just doing scores. And the same, I would say, for crew members. We have production service companies mostly here in Reykjavik, but we also have, in a couple of them in the north as well.
So I think we've probably got time for, I'm looking at the clock here, probably one more question round for you guys. We've got a couple of questions coming in that we should ask from our other participants there. So I wanted to quickly just have a chat about stage space, because obviously when we kind of came back, and certainly our experience here was that productions tended to want to go indoors at first, shoot on stages. It was more, or in build spaces, it was a safer and easier to manage environment. How has that experience been for you all? Laura, have you got stages in your area? Have you noticed an increase in demand for build spaces? Is there anything, what's happening in your area?
Yeah, it's actually been a bit of a fascinating transition here over the last, I would say, couple of years, because productions and line producers here have always been, really comfortable working in, retrofit style spaces. And so, using the local arenas and hockey rinks, and it all worked really well, and everybody was pretty comfortable with it. And so I see a transition, across the world, and I think it's probably driven by, obviously higher production budgets, and the sort of lion's share of the production coming from, the major streamers that are the ones that are sort of, driving it. And so now we're seeing productions that are coming here that aren't necessarily comfortable working in some of these spaces. And so you kind of have to level up. And so we recognize this. I mean, I think it started to become really clear to me that production was going to be, you were going to be overwhelmed with production in 2020 in the fall of, or sorry, in 2021. I realized it in the fall of 2020.
Yeah.
And so at that time, I did a sort of a significant call out campaign, a come home campaign and a production space campaign. So we were calling all of the crews who had left after 2015 to come home. And we were calling out to anybody that had space that was empty, you know, be it convention centers because events weren't happening, you know, just any space at all that, you know, that could be used for production. And so we spent a good portion of earlier this year, say January, February. I have a lady who works with me, Melanie, she's our industry services and locations manager. And so she put a really big push on basically just spreading the word and filling up our database with spaces that wouldn't necessarily have been available before. So, so it was pretty wild and amazing what came out of the woodwork. Lots of warehouse spaces that wouldn't necessarily have wanted to have gotten involved in the film industry because they would prefer long-term leases.
Yes,
you know, started getting involved. And so, you know, that's great. It's a short-term solution because of course, when the world opens back up, who knows if these places will want to continue to, you know, to lease out to production. But what that also did is it's, I started to hear from project management companies, engineering companies, and building companies that they were interested in building purpose-built sound stages in Nova Scotia. And so, you know, just relatively, the number of companies that kind of came out of the woodwork to start having conversations about this, I think it was 5 that were really, really, really interested. They were all, you know, in the discovery phase, but I managed to get this information over to our federal government and had them finance a soundstage study on the production needs of Nova Scotia. And so we're expecting to have the results of that study back at the end of this month. And that will inform how we go forward and how we support the, you know, sort of independent companies that are interested in building here in Nova Scotia. So I think this transition has is going to create some really, really interesting change in Nova Scotia. I think we're going to have some much better, much more usable industry standard, attractive space coming up in the next year.
And Julie, have you seen an increase in demand for stage space in your area?
No, I wouldn't say so. I mean, we definitely have probably 3 to 4 large sound stages that are spread out throughout Louisiana, and then tons of like smaller outfitted, you know, a warehouse or I know you were saying, Laura, you were saying like using an arena or whatever, where like people will just makeshift something. I mean, there's probably 3, 4, 5 that are actual like soundstage, like major, you know, productions use that space. But a lot of the smaller productions or the domestic productions will kind of just wing it and use a warehouse. And, you know, and there are some that are outfitted to be a soundstage. They're just like much smaller than something that a large production would come into. But I haven't seen an increase. I feel like there's probably more than enough for people to use. Yeah.
And Einar, you were telling me about your fabulous stage that you've got up there and your plans. Could you give us a little brief on that?
Yeah, we have one big stage here in Iceland, one of the biggest single stages in Europe, actually, called RVK Studios. And that has been used both for international and domestic productions. And we kind of see like a hub being created up there. It's in Reykjavik. We have the biggest rental house. There's their house next to it, and the post-production houses, carpenters, and so on, what you need to service. So that is quite good. And then we have seen a lot of interest from investors on on building a new stage, another place in town. They've already kind of made all the drawings and, you know, been going around seeing if there's a need for it, kind of scanning the market. And there is an interest, of course, from your stages. As we know, you know, TV is getting stronger, and this wave of TV that came with Netflix, you know, has pushed and increased the demands for more stage work. So I definitely think that Iceland will, you know, not only be, you know, suitable for extreme locations, and they will also be quite sought after when we have those stages up. At the moment, like Laura mentioned, of course, we're using warehouses, but, you know, purposely built stages are the preferred choice, I would say.
Always. So I've got a couple of questions here. So we're into the last few minutes. Unfortunately, it's been fascinating speaking to you all. First question here. Canada has been working with TV5 on the French language platform. Does Louisiana have strong links with France or other Francophone countries?
We do, actually. TV Saint Monde is here. We have another Tele Louisiane, which is a French broadcast station. One of my jobs that does the grant, give grants to filmmakers. We have a grant right now that is for French Culture Film Grant, and it's for Louisiana filmmakers who are who can make a film about like French culture or Francophone culture in Louisiana. We've been doing that for 5 years. TV Saint Monde is a partner on that grant, so they help fund the money that we give to the filmmakers. Yeah, I mean, so sure, we do. We work a lot with other French-speaking countries, not just France or Canada, but you know, Belgium, or, you know, some of the African islands, things like that. We also have like French festivals here, so, you know, we have a lot of relationships with different countries throughout the world to support those festivals as well.
And Laura, a similar question, I guess. Do you produce a lot of content that goes out to internationally to other French-speaking countries?
We do. I mean, here in Nova Scotia, we have a couple of production companies that are specifically focused on French content. You know, Nova Scotia, you know, French is a second language. It's not it doesn't make up a large part of our population, but as Julie would know, we do have a strong Acadian community, and so, you know, that's a French-speaking community, and there's a lot of interest from, you know, our Acadian communities to create content for, you know, national broadcast. I'm not sure that we're seeing a lot of our Acadian French content going international, but we're definitely seeing it being shared across Canada. Great.
So question for all of you here, and I guess this is our chance for our last one. So we'll start with Einar. Which project or production are you most proud of getting to land in your area as a result of your film commission's work?
I would probably say my first one. I kind of jumped into the deep end right at the beginning. It was back in 2004, I think it was.
Long time ago.
It was with Clint Eastwood, project called Flags of Our Fathers. It's probably still, I would say, one of the biggest productions we've got into Iceland. There were up to 1,000 people on the set on some days. So yeah, I would say that's probably the one.
And Julie, what about you? Obviously, from a different perspective, as a consultant or whatever. What's the project that kind of sticks out for you?
I don't know. I've worked on a lot of different things. I think the first one that just comes to mind, but I don't know why, maybe it's because of Matthew McConaughey, would probably be Free State of Jones, which was, you know, came out a few years ago. yeah, I would say that one was, I was pretty excited to work on, and it was a fun production.
Great. And Laura?
Well, I have two, and for different reasons, and I'll be quick because I know we're done. But the first one is the Lighthouse. It's an A24 production, Robert Eager's film, filmed here with Robert Pattinson, Willem Dafoe, and it was the first real big budget feature that we had come here to use our locations and service produce after the tax credit was dismantled. And so that was a real win for us. But I was only 7 days into my job when that came, so I can't take credit for it. The film commission can. But personally, for me, I take the most pride in a feature film that shot here last 2 years ago, called The Good House, and it was a Spielberg project. And the reason why I'm so proud of it is because I walked into their office and literally changed their mind. They had completely intent on going somewhere, and I just changed their mind. And that's when I kind of got hooked.
Yeah, absolutely. That's it. I think when you realize the sort of value of some of these projects that you're involved in bringing into your area, the economic value for that, the opportunities and skills and development of our young future, it is amazing. So I just wanted to say thank you so much to everybody for coming on the panel. I've found it incredibly interesting. It's always great to speak with fellow commissioners and filmmakers on subjects that we love. So yeah, thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks for having us.
Bye, guys.
Goodbye.
Bye.